I'd like to call the meeting to order. City of Belleville acknowledges we are meeting today on the traditional territory of many nations. We recognize and honor the historic relationship of the Indigenous peoples to this land and acknowledge our shared obligation to respect, honor, and sustain these lands and the natural resources contained within them. We recognize Indigenous peoples, including First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, who call Belleville their home and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with them. We look forward to fostering a path towards reconciliation and show respect for the Indigenous peoples who first lived and currently live on this land where we now all reside together. Please remain standing for a moment of reflection.
May we be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Help us to be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chambers minds that think and hearts that feel, always having respect for others, so that we may serve the people of our city in a helpful manner and the good of all.
Please be seated. Tenants, we're here today. Everybody, disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Seeing none, I need a motion for the correspondence. The correspondence dated June 10th, 26 from Ruth Estwick, Chief Executive Officer, Quinte Home Builders Association, be received. Moved by Councillor Chatton, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Discussion, all in favor, carried. I now need a motion to go into committee of the whole at 3:02 p.m. to hear and consider reports, passing recommendations, resolution with Councillor Chatton in the chair.
Okay, for A1 reports, Canada-Ontario Partnership to Build and Development Charge Reduction Program, the recommendation reads that pursuant to the Director of Engineering and Development Services report number ENG 202606, Canada-Ontario Partnership to Build and Development Charge Reduction Program, staff be directed to apply for the Development Charge Reduction Program in advance of the deadline of June 19th, 2026. Could I get a mover? Moved by Mayor Ellis and seconded by Councillor Sue. Discussion?
I think on this, I'll just ask the staff, should we plug a figure into this and then go from there and then move it if applicable?
Through the chair, yes, we can identify a percentage that council can then discuss.
Okay, I'll start with 100% then.
Do we have to move that as a verbal amendment?
Do you have to get somebody
Or friendly
second it?
amendment? Is that?
Friendly.
Friendly?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry. So
sure.
I'll reread it with 100%. That pursuant to the Director of Engineering and Development Services, report number ENG-2026-06, Canada-Ontario Partnership to Build and Development Charge Reduction Program, staff be directed to apply for the Development Charge Reduction Program in advance of the deadline of June 19, 2026 at 100%. And moved by Mayor Ellis, seconded by Councillor Sue. Any discussion? Councillor Thompson?
Need clarification on what the 100% means.
I believe that refers to the 100% of the development charges in terms of a percentage of how much. Mayor Ellis?
I'll speak first, and I guess we got to start somewhere. And my thoughts would be to front-end load it, and I'd have to ask the treasurer this, but my proposal would be 100% the first year, 50% the second year, and 30% the third year to help impact of it. That's where I'd like to start. The other thing with this, and I'll ask the treasurer this, if we were to implement this and be turned down from the provincial government for funding in August, would we be able to roll the amounts back to no development fees waived at all, or a different ratio?
Director Ferguson?
Through the chair to mayor and all of council. The minimum commitment requirement for the program is to provide a 30 to 50% discount across each year for the total of 3 years. So updating the amendment to be above those and at least maintain those should be eligible within the program. We would absolutely verify that in advance of the application.
And I guess part of discussion with that, I was on the phone over the weekend with our Member of Parliament, MPP, Tyler Allstott, and he mentioned that if we weren't affected to funding that, we could roll back to a slot. So that's what I wanted to check with you. I also talked to Minister Flack 2 weeks ago about this. I know it's a lot of risk. It's risk about whether we're going to get this money or not, but his comment to me, would I like to do an announcement in Belleville, and that he would be behind this. Now, having said that, I don't have that on writing, but if we don't do something, there's no chance of getting any funding for our infrastructure over the next 10 years. I'll leave it at that. I know that the Quinte Home Builders are the largest employers in the city of Belleville. In the report in their letter, it tells you how much a house generates in the city of Belleville. Not only the building of the house, but lawyers' fees, accountants' fees, and all the spin-offs, whether it's buying a hot tub, whether it's putting a fence in. So there is a lot of economic impact in this. I know also, I don't like to say this, but we are in competition with municipalities around us. They do build houses also. And I'm looking at this, if we go in with a creative plan, like I suggested, I think that a lot of housing in the area, whether it's from Hastings County, Prince Edward County, or Quinte West, would be built in Belleville, and we would have all growth that we do need, and tax dollars and revenue to come in later. Thank you.
Further questions, comments? Councillor Thompson, you had your hand up. Did you? No, okay, sorry. Councillor Carr?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I got a few questions. I guess staff had run some different scenarios, and I'm just looking at CMHC report regarding development charges, and there's a report that compares development charges across the country, quite frankly. And in Ottawa, for example, and Ottawa's development charges are $46,000 right now. With a reduction, the viable projects increase by only 1.3%, and with an elimination, so 100%, the viability of projects in Ottawa increased by 3%. So my first question, I guess through you, Madam Chair, to the Director of Engineering Development Services, with 100% reduction, or sorry, 100% elimination, and based on conversations that that have been had with the building sector in our region, what would be the increased viability of the projects with respect to 100% elimination?
Thank you. Director Ashton, would you be able to speak to that, please?
So just for clarification, do you mean how many additional units?
Well, in terms of CMHC, they assess it based on viability. So obviously, if there's, through you, Madam Chair, if there's a reduction, then they say the viability of a project will go up. And if there's a reduction in, say, Ottawa, for example, a reduction increases the viability of a project by 1.3%, and eliminating the DCs increases the viability of building projects in Ottawa at 3%. In Toronto and Vancouver, larger sectors, viability increases by 5% with a reduction, or 10% with an elimination. So I guess I'm trying to get an understanding. We're neither size, and I doubt that our building totals would match that. But in terms of viability for projects, if we're eliminating the DCs at 100% for that first year, where do you see the viability of projects going in terms of percentage of increase?
So from the, through the chair, through the discussions we've had with the Home Builders Association, we didn't get into viability rates, but they did indicate that there would be increase, and they used, because they had a limited time, just as staff did, to sort of look at options. They looked at a surveying of some of their members, and at 50% reduction, they would look at an extra 100 units per year. So, and then if it would be 100% reduction, then it would be increased more. Those would be numbers I don't have in front of me right now because I don't think they had the opportunity to survey their members at that point in time. I think in terms of what we do have a lot of approvals on hand. We have draft plan approvals. We have plans of subdivisions registered, not fully built out. And we have a lot of infill lots with site plan applications in process. So there is that opportunity for these projects to proceed at a rate either based on the market, which I understand is dependent upon maybe perhaps some of the costs related to their construction.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few more. The director mentioned consultation with the Quinte home builders, and I know that it was around 50% or thereabouts, maybe a little bit less, that are contributed through the Quinte home builders group to the housing builds. But we have a lot of non-member builders as well. And I was wondering, through you, Madam Chair, if the director could advise council whether there had been any lobbying or any consultation, or has any of the non-Quinte Home Builders Association builders reached out to the city with respect to this program?
Director Ashton, if you would.
Through the chair, we haven't had any, or I haven't, or I don't think my staff have had any discussions with non-QHBA members. You're right, they count for about 40, over the last 5 years, they accounted for about 47.5% of all new residential units built within the city. I think some of that is also attributed to apartment buildings, those types of developments that tend to be from builders outside of the area. And so even though we haven't had that opportunity, we did sort of use QHBA numbers to extrapolate based on those percentages that they do build of what could be the anticipated increase in housing units. Again, we do have a lot of apartment sites that would probably be potential for development by non-QHBA members as well as QHBA members. And we would expect that at some point in time they come forward. The timing would be dependent upon the market and the construction costs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Still got a few more questions. One thing I think that we need to consider in looking at the development charge reduction program guidelines, and it talks about the application requirements. I went through it over the weekend, and we need an estimate on the number of housing units that will benefit from the reduced development charges. And so I think it's imperative that, and I know we have correspondence from the Quinte home builders, there was no numbers included within their correspondence other than they were advocating for council to support the program. But I think we need a commitment in writing from both the Quinte home builders and the non-members who build in our community in terms of the housing numbers that will benefit, so that we have an accurate number to include in that application. I'll leave that there. The other question I have, Madam Chair, is like every other program that seems to run through the province of Ontario, it's always hard to understand how they assess progress and how it's measured, and then also where that accountability lies with that measurement. And I have done a lot of reading over the weekend between AMO documents, CMHC, the actual development charge reduction program that the province had put out. And I was wondering if perhaps maybe the Director of Engineering Development Services could tell council what is considered success, or how is it measured? For example, we know with the Building Faster Fund, it came down to actually foundations in the ground, of which council knows we don't build foundations, we issue approvals, or the city does, and provide permits. Even having a permit in hand doesn't necessarily mean that a foundation is going to follow. How is success measured in this program?
Director Ashton again, if you would.
Through the chair.
Thank you.
So with this program, it was released on June 1st. Details are coming out even on Saturday in terms of the financial analysis. There were clarification of details in terms of success or what it would look like for those residential units. We are still getting clarification. So currently, I would anticipate that it would either be through what the CMHC does for their Housing Accelerator Fund, which is building permits, or it would be as the Building Faster Fund, which would be typically foundation permits. So for the sake of this financial analysis, we did utilize numbers that were provided through our new development charge study that's currently underway, which I believe is approximately 422 units per year averaged over the 10-year period. So we use that as a basis. We will, based upon if council supports this application for submission, we'll go and at what rate we will go as an internal working group and review what we can expect for increased number of units. Right now, yeah, we do have it pegged at approximately 1,566 units. That may have to be adjusted depending on clarification of what those numbers are, or what a start is considered. There have been different interpretations through AMO and also through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in terms of the building permits issued, and then there would be a time beyond the 3-year period to finish or to start the development. So we are getting clarification on that, and we would adjust our application accordingly based on that feedback.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, the 2 more questions. One is related now to the risk to the taxpayer, because clearly if you go with the theory of growth paying for growth and you're going to offset it with provincial funding, but if the development doesn't follow suit, of which we have no control over, then we have to look at what that risk is to the taxpayer to pay up that difference. And I'm wondering, and I know that the Director of Finance provided a few scenarios for us, but perhaps, and I reviewed it through the lens of 38%, because that was the figure in the report that was kind of flushed out between the 30 and 50. But here now on the floor, we've got 100%, 50%, and 30%. And through you, Madam Chair, I was wondering if the Director of Finance could just walk council through the risk associated with the financials should building not occur to the levels expected. What would that end up costing the existing taxpayer?
Director Ferguson, if you would.
Through the chair to Councillor Carr and all of council. For the recommendation that's on the floor, the reference point from the scenarios provided might most closely represent the 60% reduction. So that would look at about $27 million worth of projects being brought forward, and the city's incremental funding being within the projects that are applied for within our capital planning expectations. As you mentioned, for sensitivity, the challenge becomes when there's housing impacts that are outside of the projections that are provided. Every 100 units was provided as an estimate that once we're locked into the funding with the province, any change in those projections would become a risk to the municipality to fund those through other sources. So it's about $1.6 million that could be $1.7 million that could need to be absorbed. Again, that's broken down between different funding components. The DC is broken down between tax-funded water and wastewater components. So we'd estimate, based on the projects which are still getting identified, as well as the breakdown from the rate, that would be around $700,000 of that would be tax-funded related items, where we would need to provide tax increases or look to tax-funded reserve funds to balance the difference. The remaining has a rather large wastewater component. We have some large wastewater DCs being driven. And that's just under $1 million for that we'd need to look for. And again, that's just on a 100-unit increment. We also provided analysis for a 10% reduction in program funding. The province did identify that there may be, may look at not providing full contributions, and that would be likely tied to the housing count and housing numbers that they're looking for to support the application. We'll provide the best application possible with the supporting housing numbers, but when they review that, they'll be looking at the funding that they would be providing as well, making sure that that is provided out to the development community is the expectation. Any change in funding that they would provide is outlined there. We did that in 10% increments. So if we saw reductions on that for 10%, it could be up to $2.6 million. That would be, moving from a 90% split to a 90-10 to an 80-20.
Thank you. Madam Chair, the last question I have before I have a couple comments relates more to process, and I'm going to refer this through to the CAO. Council's being asked to adopt a motion here today, which will direct staff to submit an application to the provincial government. Obviously, it will be subject to a transfer payment agreement that would come back to council for ratification. My question is that council doesn't have all the information. We certainly don't know what we're going to qualify for and then what we will financially want to commit to. With that TPA coming back to council, we'll have an opportunity to say yes or no to it. So agreeing to this in principle today does not bind us legally to sign an agreement should the province come back and indicate that the funding that they're willing to provide is much less than what we anticipated, and based on financial calculations, it just would not make economic sense for the taxpayers of the city of Belleville to fund that shortfall. So I'm asking somewhat of a legal question in terms of, and I know you're not a lawyer, but to get an idea of is council bound to this by today, or will we have the opportunity for a sober second look when the agreement comes back? And then with that, Madam Chair, my second question comes down to timing. And I know that the province is trying to get the applications approved before the nomination period closes for municipal elections. And I'm also wondering what impact a lame duck status council would have in terms of ratifying such payment agreement. And if we were not in a position to do so, then because council's provided that direction now, does that give you the delegated authority to proceed with that application in place of council because of lame duck status? I know there's a lot there, but
could you repeat the first part of the question? The first.
I can.
Mr. McDonald.
Through the chair to Councillor Carr. Do I think you're bound by the decision of council tonight? I think the province and the federal government joint program would like to bind you to a decision. The reality is, yes, you're going to have to pass a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement, TPA. We have lots of them, signed them before. That is council exercising the authority to enter into that agreement, which would have funds flow to the municipality based on the agreement. You're authorizing the submission of an application. By very nature, could be accepted, could be sent back, could be approved. So there are still things to happen between a decision of council, if one is forthcoming tonight, and it being approved by the program, being denied by the program, being modified by the program, all things happening. Second part is more challenging for me in the event that council passes a delegation of authority bylaw. In the event that council falls into lame duck restricted acts under the Municipal Act. A decision made on the floor tonight would not automatically delegate authority to the CAO to exercise anything. Those acts would have to be in the delegation of authority bylaw that council would pass prior to the restricted act provision, lame duck provision in the act. So the decision tonight doesn't automatically provide the ability of myself or any other staff member to exercise delegated authority. So that wouldn't be an automatic from my perspective. We could get an interpretation of that, but not from my seat today.
Okay, thank you.
CAO, just before you go on, just in terms of your first part of your question, the TPA coming back to council, how long does a TPA generally require? Because this has to be in, I think, by June 19th.
That's correct. Through the chair, to the chair and all of council, it varies widely. I don't think there's a standard time. We've seen them come back quickly. We've seen them we've had TPAs come back very near the end of programs and surprisingly got them and executed them. My understanding is that this joint program, as I said, federal and provincial funding joint program, they are cognizant of timing, unique timing in the municipal world that we're functioning in right now with an impending election. And so would guess that they're working on getting TPAs standardized and prepared to come out, and that they'll be filling in blanks, but I would suggest, I'm literally guessing that they'll have them here in a timely fashion.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just some comments on it. AMO is come out and said that clearly there's some risk to municipalities that have to be considered. I know that there's been certainly heavy lobby when it comes to development charges as being the issue in terms of affordability, and I think we could argue all day that that could play some role, but I don't think it's the end all and be all. I know that the Premier has taken shots in the dark to try to come at housing affordability from many angles, and some of the legislation has fallen up short time and time again. And so development charges now seems to be the new target. It's been referred to, of course, as a tax, but in some respects, it's also paying for the growth that's occurring. It's been suggested that when you do have growth, then that's additional tax base, et cetera, but sitting around this table, we know that as we grow, that things get more expensive. And we hear it, the police service comes and says our population's growing, we need more police officers. Police officers need more cars, there's your capital. Need more space, bigger building, there's your capital, there's your development charges. So it doesn't take long for growth to cause those pains, of which then you have to find ways to pay for it. And so that's where the growth for growth comes into play. It's interesting when you look across the municipality, and I've got a table here provided by CMHC in Oakville. Their development charges are at $125,000, and I think we're at $32,000. So I know when the province looks at these applications, they're going to be looking at those great big numbers and see how they knock them down. Not optimistic that our small amount's going to catch a blip, but perhaps maybe the conversations that the mayor's had with the minister may change that. The other issue I have, like any other program, is the province is measuring the city's success or the municipality's success on the actions taken by the private sector. And that's never worked out well. Even in our Building Faster Fund and those tracking totals, which of course I see the website's gone dormant, but I do know that we track it here, and in the conversations that the city has with the ministries, that those continue to be tracked, but certainly not a forward-facing tracking anymore. Even the 1 year where they said we came up short, we in fact were not short. But again, it comes down to the fact that we don't control the build. Here, I think we need a commitment from the building community in terms of what it is they want to do. We've got that from staff in the report, but if we're going to partner in this, then I think there really needs to be a firm commitment as to what's going to be built. The other side of it with development charges, like the HST rebate, it's about reducing the cost of the house. And there are studies in the GTA, for example, where with the HST rebate hasn't resulted in a reduction in pricing. It's unfortunate that the new home buyer couldn't take a new home purchase agreement and then apply to the government and actually get a refund back for the development charge or for the HST, so that you know that you're actually reducing that cost. But because of the flow through, it's not clear as to whether they actually will receive the affordability. The last thing I want to say is there's this theory that you add more supply, it impacts the price. If that's the case, and I've done some research and certainly read a few books, where Vancouver, for example, has one of the highest density cities in the world in terms of, or in Canada at least, in terms of real estate, and added supply. They have one of the most expensive markets. So the theory of adding supply means your price is going to be reduced. Doesn't necessarily correlate there, but that's an argument that the lobbying group has certainly used to go after development charges as being the thing that's going to make things more affordable. But in the end, I'm a little bit concerned about the ratio and the risk, and I'm a little concerned too about how the program is being assessed. But I do take comfort in the fact that if a TPA comes back to council, that we have an opportunity to assess what it is the province is willing to pay. And finally, I just want to say too, that let's not lose sight of the fact that at our last meeting, we asked the mayor to write a letter to the minister because we're still short $7.2 million in development charge funds that were waived for nonprofits and things of that nature, which the minister at the time committed to the Ontario big city mayors, that they would make municipalities whole. They've not made us whole on those, and even here now, they're not exactly making us whole as well, but they certainly are making us to be the villains in terms of the fact that housing is so expensive because development charges are. I would argue that they are certainly in Oakville at $125,000 or $150,000 per single family unit. Little different scenario here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Just a quick question for you, because you had posed the question about the ratio versus risk and the interest in hearing about building commitment. Is there any objection to having, I saw past Chair John Van Heusen is here in the gallery, also CEO Ruth Estwick is. Is there any objection to hearing from them to answer that for you, or if they're able to do so or willing to do so?
Madam Chair, I'm not looking for a commitment today. I suggest,
but if they've even talked about it, we wouldn't know.
I suggest commitments in writing are the best. Thank you.
So that would be an objection to hearing from them? Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have a number of questions for staff and others. My first is a clarification. Will the housing builds throughout the city qualify for the DC reductions, or will it be limited to housing within the area where the housing enabling infrastructure project services?
Director Ashton?
So I think they're looking more at total numbers. The infrastructure projects that we put forward are going to be providing supply. Essentially, over the next 3 years, you know, there will be building activity based on the current infrastructure, and then these development charge reductions, if council chooses that, will fund future infrastructure projects as well. So,
my next question. If our application is successful, and I'm just going to ask very similar to what Councillor Carr had posed, if our application is successful, where will the potentially reduced provincial funding, project delays, and housing not realized be funded if council does not support it being funded by existing taxpayers who have already paid DC charges?
Director Ferguson, if you would.
Through the chair to Councillor Brown, all the council. Currently, and as mentioned, if the TPA came through at a lower amount that was approved by council, those items would either need to be funded through the tax or user rate funded portfolios or reserve funds associated with those particular areas.
So just as a follow-up to that question, potentially we could be looking at how to realize those reserve funds. So for instance, would we have to go back and look at the 10-year capital plan and potentially delay projects, or move them out past the 10-year timeline in order to free up either capital or reserve fund, DC reserve funds?
Through the chair to Councillor Brown, absolutely that could be a financing strategy to soften the utilization of the reserves, or compensate for those funds being taken from reserve, is then the delay of infrastructure projects within the capital program.
So is a financing strategy available or expected to be provided to council fairly quickly?
Through the chair to Councillor Brown, that is the indication when the TPA comes back, we could more clearly identify which particular item and to the extent that we would need to come up with alternative financing. As an example, the 10% reduction in funding was provided to show some magnitude of, based on the reduction selected, what that variance would be if there was, per se, a 10% reduction.
Okay, thank you. My next question, will stacking be permitted? And by that I meant a DC reduction plus tier affordable renting housing plus accessibility top-ups. So stacking between our CIP and the DC reductions.
I'm not sure who to direct that to, but Director Ashton, would you know the answer to that one? I'm
Through the
not
chair.
familiar with stacking, sorry.
Through the chair, so that is a good question. So in regards to stacking for other types of government funding, it's not allowed. We would get clarification on our own internal CIP, which I think you're asking that question. And we will make adjustments as required as fast as possible if council chooses to make application. But we do have, I believe, till August to proceed with making those changes to the CIP program. But I don't want to actually make any assumptions at this moment, but we'll get clarification and make the proper changes if required.
So I do think that it's important that we create clarification on if DC reductions is something that we determine we would like to undertake, what the impact would be to the CIP program that we've only just recently approved. My last question, it starts out like an opinion, but there are in fact questions in it. Will the fact that Belleville has consistently exceeded its annual housing targets compared to the prescribed number that the province has provided direction on, and yes, I acknowledge that in 2024, they only counted 80% as opposed to 100 or better. But again, it comes down to the difference between how we counted and how the province chose to count it. But I feel it's important to say that we've consistently exceeded our annual housing targets. And we're well on our way to be able to exceed the 2031 target that we've already. So my question is the fact that we are already meeting or exceeding all of our housing targets be a disqualifying factor in favor of all of the other municipalities that are falling well below their targets?
Director Ashton, please.
No, I think we have been fortunate, and I think it's just, it shows well with the city of Belleville in that we have been exceeding that 10-year target to date for the Building Faster Fund. I think this year there has been a bit of there's been a drop in building permits issued and housing starts. So will we swing back after after this blip? I guess this is probably also an incentive sort of to sort of hopefully make sure that we stay on track with our annual housing targets. I can't really comment with regards to how other municipalities are considered if they don't meet their housing targets. Sometimes they're part of regional government and they're not given allocation, for example, for water or wastewater, so their numbers are deflated. Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, there's so many unknowns of how they will evaluate, but I guess if council asks us to proceed, we'll put the best application forward and make the best argument. I think in the report, I did indicate, as sort of identified through the regional growth study that occurred for Hastings and Hastings County and Prince Edward County, that Belleville does attract the majority of development of new residential units. So I would assume, maybe that's wrong, that they would sort of consider, whoever's reviewing this, that we are a very important part of the development question of housing within this area. And I think that's probably the best, yeah, without knowing. But also, sorry, if you could indulge me in answering the CIP question. The other consideration that we'll be looking at for, before we do submit the application, is there is the question of waivers of DCs, but then some municipalities have asked the ministry if they can utilize the DC reduction through their CIP program, which would essentially be the same thing. And the ministry has indicated yes, potentially, so we will also be looking at that. So going back to your original question about the CIP, I would assume we would be able to maintain the CIP program for those top-ups for, say, accessibility. But again, we'll confirm that as well.
Okay. And lastly, if I may, Madam Chair, I think all of my colleagues around the table have probably spent the last 4 or 5 days deeply entrenched in trying to understand the staff report. The information is still coming out late this afternoon, and looking at the information that AMO has provided and others. My perspective coming away from all of that reading, looking at what CMHC has offered others, the way the program is set, it appears that the city, and therefore the taxpayers, are assuming all of the risk in this program. And I struggle with the fact that, again, it's being reflected, this is a municipal issue. And anyone just has to look at how quickly the Planning Advisory Committee out of the city and our staff, the superb work that they do, would suggest to you that the municipality, in the framework of what we are required to do, are not the issue, and yet we're being asked to assume all of the risk. Regrettably, for my colleague to my right, I looked at this from the lens of 38% all weekend long. I've asked questions, I've talked with finance, I've talked with anybody I could talk to about this. So being presented with 100% as an amendment to the motion is a bit disconcerting. I've had no time to have my head wrapped around it. And again, even if it's 100%, that means that the taxpayers, we the city, on behalf of the taxpayers, are going to assume all of the risk the way it is currently laid out in the program guidelines. That gives me great pause for thought about whether or not I feel that it's appropriate, when we are reaching the end of our term as a council, of encumbering future councils with that risk without really understanding all of the financial implications that we are attempting to do on the fly. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions, comments? Councillor Enright Miller, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, labored over this longingly over the weekend. I had lots of questions, most of which have been asked already. It looks like it's a remedy for growth. The home builders and the city, I think, should partner in an application. We may be getting ahead of ourselves, but I think the application warrants submission and to see where it goes. I do wonder, though, since Belleville has been very successful in all of the other programs, whether we would be looked at like other municipalities that haven't been as successful in growth. So that sort of gives me pause whether that will happen or not. But this is a tough one, yes. The taxpayers ultimately are the ones that we are saddling with any potential risk. What, I guess, to Director Ferguson, in the financial stream, what is the worst-case scenario that we would be looking at financially for the taxpayers if none of this came to fruition? Or are we okay with just, if the application's being made, it'll come back as a transfer, and then we can sort of go from there to decide where we're going next with this?
Director Ferguson, please.
Through the chair to Councillor Enright Miller and all of council, I think for the scenarios that were provided, the 60% reduction is a bit of an indicator for the risk on the sensitivity analysis. The challenge, even when we come back at application stage, we'll have a much better indication of what the provincial and federal funding will look like. So we'll be able to mitigate or assess that risk at that point in time. Provided some sensitivity for a 10% reduction, what that would look like, and likely what I would come back to identify we would need to make up the shortfall with. The more challenging one is we'll continue to work on the housing figures right up until we get the best figures available to put into the application, which is fast approaching. But even at the time of TPA, we may be challenged to identify what housing growth looks like over the 3-year period. So those risks will still be available, will still be present, but we'll come back with the best available information when we're executing the TPA based on whatever the direction of council for the application is, to identify our best estimates of what those would be.
Director Ferguson, just for clarity, you said at the reference point of 60, it was 1.6 to 1.7 million. Is that correct?
To the chair, that is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Yep, please.
Sorry, to the treasurer. Does that include
Microphone, please.
clarification of that number? You said 1.6. Is that growth included in there for the homes that would be, new homes that would be built?
Through the chair to the mayor and all of council, that doesn't provide an indication of growth. I can kind of speculate or identify that 100 units essentially could be somewhere about $600,000 worth of tax revenue that may come in. Again, that all comes down to the average assessment that's coming on when I look at kind of the new builds or the information from the past year for supplemental billings. That might be a bit of an indicator. Again, would note, however, each operating budget, as the city grows, our costs also grow. So we do see incremental costs that would be expected as well in the budget period.
Were those all your questions, Councillor Enright Miller? Yes. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just got one basic question and a statement. In these builders, would they be building on pre-sale or would they be building on some speculation? I know that because if we don't build on some spec, then it's not going to put enough houses on the market to, in my estimation, to help with the reduction in price. So I'm hoping that the builders are willing to do some housing on spec along with the pre-sale, because right now we don't have enough housing on the market and our prices are high. And if I feel with the reduction in the DCs, if we get some more houses on the market, it will impact our availability, people will be out buying. So I'm hoping the builders are willing to do some housing on spec. And again, the city will have some risk in this aspect, but this city has taken on risk before, and I realize it's the taxpayers' money that's at risk, but as a city, if we're going to progress, we need industry, but we need housing. And we all have heard that industry want to come, and if we don't have housing, and if we don't have affordable housing, then this city really is going to struggle even more. And I hear all the time, we don't have enough houses at a lower price. I don't know what the average price is right now, probably in the 600, 700, maybe it's 500. But if we can reduce that down, it's going to make the person that's sort of on the borderline of being able to afford a house. And I'm hoping that these DCs come through for us over the long run. But if we don't take this opportunity, I think is an opportunity that we're losing. So I'm in favor of at least applying for the funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Sorry, Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Good conversation today around what we're discussing. For those that don't have information or are privy to maybe the report that we received from Stephen Ashton, who is the Director of Engineering and Development Services for the City of Belleville, we're discussing today the Canada-Ontario Partnership to Build and Development Charge Reduction Program. So the feds and the province have come up and said we have $8.8 billion over 10 years to share with different municipalities to help with the development charges for municipalities to bring on growth. And this is a residential growth to meet our needs for the City of Belleville for 20 years. So that takes us to 2046. When I was reading the report, and a great job there, Mr. Ashton. So Belleville, based upon the study that was quoted in the report, Belleville was identified as the municipality leading growth within the regional area under the regional forecast to 2051. Belleville is expected to accommodate 38% of the population growth in the region, compared to 25% for Quinte West and Prince Edward County, and around 18%. So we've got our work ahead of us, the builders do. We have to be ready for people are moving to our community. We know that. We see that all the time. Our population now is reported to be 62,000 people. We know we're a retirement destination, so we have to have homes for people to come. In the report, too, it talks about if the DCs are reduced, this will help our local home builders reach their targets, and that is a benefit. I look at this report, and I did, as Councillor Brown referred to, look at it a few times over the weekend, and I guess I'm summarizing here, lower upfront costs for builders and buyers, more housing. Why wouldn't we take advantage of the provincial and federal funding to support our housing targets and ways to support our community? And there is risk, but if the feds and the province are coming up with $8.8 billion, I believe that we'll be fortunate and very successful. Councillor Thompson asked about the average house price. I looked that up, and Belleville's in at $725,000 for the average home. However, you can get into homes just over $500,000, some brand new in around $400,000. So my question to Mr. Ashton is, before we get into the question, I just wanted to say this about housing. So I met with a family on Friday or Thursday, had a conversation, and they purchased a new home in the city of Belleville, and they moved to our community 4 or 5 years ago to go to Loyalist College. The kids are in school, dad's working hard, mom's working. Canada's been a new home, new opportunity, and they buy the brand new home for $300,000. And then they find out that there's also a 25% tax because they're a non-resident, where they have shown a commitment to Belleville to move here. They don't have their papers yet. I checked with both our MP and MPP, and at this point, there's nothing that can be done. So they buy a home for $300,000. True price, being a non-resident, is $374,000. So that's another thing. If the DC charges was knocked off that home, maybe it's a little more affordable for them. My question for Mr. Ashton is, and I'm going to use a hypothetical. I just want to know how this works, and you're going to explain it to us. So if I'm a home builder, Kelly Home Building, and I want to build 10 homes, and I've got the property, how does the process work for the development charges? Do I get, out of the 10 homes, do I get 30,000 plus back? How does this work? Explain how this would unfold.
Director Ashton, as ordered, would you mind explaining exactly how that works?
Okay, I might have a question of clarification, but first of all, I just, in terms of the report, I know my name was on the report, but there was a lot of people involved, so I know so people behind me, they're sitting behind me, did a bulk of the work, I just wanted to point that out. as well as the directors as well. So basically, if you came in for a building permit, you're assessed what the development charge is at the time. There used to be a deferral program with the QHBA. Now it's Ontario legislation, so it's deferred. So if, for example, say it's 50% reduction, so instead of 32, you're paying 16, you get your building permit gets issued, you're going to pay at the time of occupancy $16,000. So that's basically how it works. You'll also pay the building permit as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Henderson first, and then Councillor Sue.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I'm somewhat of two minds here with this because I worked several years in real estate and several years in new construction real estate. So it's, I understand the benefit to buyers by having a reduction in the development charges. That is ensuring and assuming that the builder will pass those savings down to the buyer. It can mean the difference between not buying a home and buying a home. So, you know, that's one of the issues. I would want to be comfortable in knowing that those builders would pass those savings down to the buyers. The second issue I kind of have is the fact that the risk to the current residents, we're asking for residents to possibly subsidize other residents buying a home, and a new home that this people that are subsidizing it either aren't getting any benefit or can't afford to have that benefit. So I do have a little bit of concern in that regard. At this point, knowing that we have an opportunity to have something come back to us later on and decide at that point, I'm more comfortable with it. But that said, I do think it is a positive thing for real estate, for buyers, if we know that they have a savings at the end of the line by those development charges. So sort of my thoughts on those things right now.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the staff. Yes, myself, I spend a lot of time reading materials as well. Now, I believe that I have a much better understanding of this DCRP. I understand amazing potential benefits for Belleville. Increase housing starts, improve housing affordability over time, help address housing shortages and support provincial housing targets, economic growth, population growth, HST benefits, and all those things. So my question is, in a way, she asked, my colleague, Councillor Henderson asked this question, but I don't think I heard the answer. So my question is, if this program works, what assurances do we have that, or will there be financial benefit is actually passed on to home buyers or renters?
Director Ashton, I'm going to maybe ask you if you know the answer to that question.
As I've had informal discussions with the Home Builders Association, I mean, a lot of them base on a standard markup like all businesses do. So it was indicated to me by one of the predominant builders in the city that, you know, he looks at all his costs associated with building a house, and then he puts his standard markup. And so if the DC is less than then that's the input cost, and so that input cost is less, so the selling price is less. So, I think that's basically, you know, we go forward with working in cooperation, and you know, so that's kind of what I've been told, and I take that person at their word. So I'm assuming that other home builders would be the same way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ashton. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there any further discussion or comments? Mayor Ellis? Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize, I was on my phone. I usually don't bring it to council, but I was waiting for our MP, Chris Millette, to get back to us. And his message was, if we don't do something with our development fees, it disqualifies us for Build Canadian Homes and Build Canadian Strong Infrastructure Fund. So I don't like it. I don't like the sense that the provincial government is saying, if you don't do it, you don't get funding. Now the federal government are saying, if you don't get aboard, you don't get funding at all. So that's another risk, I guess, and we're used to being risks. This is why we're in this job, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Were there any other comments, discussion, questions? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Councillor Brown?
If I may, from the clerk, I'm just asking for confirmation. Has the motion that was provided to us been changed to reflect the amount, or is the amount being handled as an amendment?
Through the chair to Councillor Brown, the motion has been changed, and to verify, it will be reading as apply for the development charge reduction program in advance of the deadline at 100% for the first year, 50% for the second year, and 30% for the third year.
Are there any other questions regarding that? Okay, so I'll call a vote. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Could we have a recorded vote,
Recorded
please?
vote?
Councillor Carr?
No.
Councillor Chatton?
Yes.
Councillor Enright Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Henderson?
Yes.
Councillor Kelly?
Yes.
Councillor Sue?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
No.
Mayor Ellis?
Yes.
Carried by 7.
Okay, I'd like to get a motion for rise and report. Councillor Kelly and Councillor Enright Miller, all in favor, and that is carried. Thank you very much.
Okay, I need a motion for bylaw number, the confirmation of bylaw number 2026-084 be read and passed. Moved by Councillor Chatton, second by Councillor Kelly. Questions, all in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn at 4:04 p.m. Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Sue. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And just want to thank